The ultimatum arrived on every open band, wrapped in gold filigree and arrogance. Kneel to the Auric hegemony and be protected from the harvesters, Admiral Kale Syth intoned, a mask of hammered light across his four-eyed face. Decline, and accept responsibility for what follows. On the bridge of UES Resolute, Captain Leah Ortiz didn't bother to mute the jeers from junior watchstanders. She just lifted one finger. Signal, Protocol Aegis. Then blackout, she said. The lights dimmed a notch. Active arrays died. Windows slid opaque. The ship's heart rate slowed to a stealthy crawl. Across the belt, or barges in mothball colors shivered awake. Dock cranes unbolted themselves from hollow asteroids. In the Themis cluster, a closed mine yawning with dust-disgorged loaders that weren't loaders at all, collapsible mass drivers with soot on their cheeks. Foundry 9, every registry stamp defunct, rotated a fraction to bring its cold throats to bear. Civilians would have called it magic. Miners would have called it Tuesday. On a secure sideband, Ambassador Min Tran's voice was all calm steel. Leah, confirm evacuation lanes. Dunkirk rules, Ortiz replied. Everything that floats, floats toward Earth. We'll keep the lanes open. Syth's face kept speaking in the void, promising safety behind Auric banners and the ancient honor of tribute. Ortiz let him talk. A human trick as old as radios. When someone thinks the microphone is theirs, they tell you what they need more than you asked. His cadence, his implied timing, the way he left space after protect. He wasn't here to protect anything. He was here to plant a flag. Captain, Tactical said quietly, Auric vanguard shifting. Subluminous approach along the stone glass corridor. They're taking the pretty way in. Of course they are, Ortiz murmured. She remembered a museum placard about Midway, deception nets draped over island trees, fake fuel lines painted on sand. You don't beat pride head on. You set a table, light the candles, and let pride seat itself. Transmit one line before we go dark, she said. Per council code, human territory defended by human ships. Passage denied. Withdraw immediately. The words went, cold and spare. Then Resolute disappeared. So did the bulk of home fleet, unmarked hulls sliding behind rubble veils, dead glass apertures peeking through gravel curtains. On civilian scopes, it looked like the Relic fleet had shrugged and scattered. On Auric scopes, it looked worse, nothing. In Foundry 9's keel, metamaterial tiles flexed like a school of fish. Capacitor farms hummed low, hungry. The mines that lined the corridor were not explosives in the old sense, they were exhale machines, spitting chaff and powdered ice, fogging the kill box with sensor-scattering debris that drifted like snow. Ambassador, Ortiz said, eyes on a slowly tightening ring of golden icons, this is your last chance to convince Syth to skip the lecture and leave. Min Tran exhaled. He thinks he's saving us from ourselves. He also thinks the galaxy is his stage. Then we'll pull the curtain, Ortiz said. Weapons cold. Let them fire first. Resolve is a dull word until someone tests it. The Auric fired. Lances of coherent sunfire strobbed through the corridor, washing over trash rock and dead haulers, bathing the Resolute's armored skin in radiance. On human decks, nothing shook. Power needles climbed. The ship drank. Tiles shivered, currents rerouted, the heat went racing down graphite bones into banks that sighed as they filled. Absorption at 86% and rising, engineering reported, slightly breathless. Dumping into crate capacitors and mains. We're fat, Captain. Hold, Ortiz said. Let them believe the museum label. On the external bands, SYTH's voice swelled to ceremonial pitch. Humans, stand down and accept stewardship. The hegemony will. Ortiz cut the feed. The bridge fell to the hush of work. Hands moved, breaths measured. She thought of a scrap from an ethics lecture, just war proportionality, force is justified only if it spares what must be spared. You can be lethal without being wanton. The trick is to build a hammer and remember you're not a god. 12 minutes until they cross the box, Tactical said. Their formations, ornate. Ornate breaks clean, Ortiz said. Mark the ones with refugee interdiction records. She glanced at the old brass stopwatch clipped to her console, a gift from a grandmother who'd taught wireless in a coastal shack. The second hand swept. The corridor narrowed. Pride took its seat. All ships, Ortiz said on the quiet net. When the curtain drops, we are not here to impress. We are here to win and live. Hold your fire. Let their shields bloom. Then we go to work. Auric cruisers slipped into the corridor in shining files, gold spines bright against the belt's gray. Their honor ships carried banners woven of photonic thread, even their point defense twinkled prettily, a garden of disciplined light. Ortiz watched them drift past her crosshairs and felt the ship groan contentedly under another wash of energy. The tiles were full, the banks were fat, the engines were a coiled spring. Captain, Com said softly, they're painting ghost derelicts along our left flank. Holography. They think we're luring them with decoys. We are, Ortiz said. Just not that way. The box was not a rectangle but a field of probabilities defined by gravel tides and microjets bleeding from shaped rubble. Silicate choir consultants had tuned it like an instrument, a nudge of dust here to make a ship yaw 2 degrees, a puff of ice there to make a column drift. Over minutes, the ornate auric formation smeared into an ellipse pretty still, but stretched thin where it mattered. Strike packages, she asked. White kites barber polished and in their cradles, weapons replied. Sleeves loaded for split tip at 0.14 C. Missiles on leash. Point defense spun up to politely rude. Ortiz let the silence sit. Across the net, other captains waited marathon, Cold Harbor, Little Sister, ships older than their costs and twice as stubborn. The instinct to shoot when shot at is older than language. The discipline to wait while being shot at is civilization. Auric energy kept pouring. Foundry 9 took a love tap across its shell and glowed like a hearth, then bled the heat into orbiting ballast. The mines hissed and drifted. Somewhere, a human petty officer snapped a stick of gum and whispered a prayer into her sleeve. Status on evac lanes, Ortiz asked. Civilians are moving, Mintran answered from a dim room worlds away. Kithari packets entering Seoul on time. If the Auric notice, They haven't bothered to hail. Of course not, Ortiz said. Refugees don't fit the frame. The box closed with the indifference of geology. Ortiz remembered a grainy photograph of merchant hulls shuttling men off beaches under gunfire, and the scribbled caption, "We do what we must and what we can." History wasn't a set of answers, it was a map of choices. Crossing the inner line, Tactical said. Their shields are peaked. Their flanks are busy with ghosts. That was the tell. Energy shields blossomed under constant fire, they were gorgeous and greedy, tuned to drink and sing. But at the top of the song, they thinned at the rim, a mathematical necessity wrapped in style. Ortiz had paid for the math with 2 broken ships in a mining war, and a promise to never pay the same bill twice. Flag to all, she said, voice so level it might have been a test tone. Drop veils. Engines too hot. Kill box is live. Fire for effect. Resolute shed her rubble shawl and came up roaring, fusion bells white with borrowed light. Across the corridor, relics bloomed like waking volcanoes. Turrets that had crouched like barnacles snapped to bearing with insect precision. The first volley was not missiles that would have been polite, a chance for defense to sing. It was rods. White kites leapt, tungsten boron darts split tipping mid-flight, their twin noses whispering a relativistic argument no shield was built to answer. They did not flare. They did not glow. They drew the shortest of lines, and behind those lines auric gold turned to black confetti. Hits on 3 leaders, weapons reported, almost tenderly. Bloom right through the pretty. Auric point defense woke late, spitting lattices and pearls. It swatted 2 rods that would have missed anyway and felt busy. Missiles came next, ugly cylinders with brains like terriers, leashed tied to human rails until the last safe instant. They sprang and curved and tucked and came again, their guidance immune to the highbrow jammers because the keys they listened for were not on any auric list. On auric nets, orders climbed into shouts. Maintain formation. No, break left. Rally on standard. Standards were built for parades. The box did not care. Captain, engineering said, we are still gaining charge. Ortiz smiled without showing teeth. Then we'll be generous with thrust. Resolute muscled through a hail of light, armor tiles shimmying with each wash, mass drivers cycling with the steady thump of a heart. On the starboard repeater, a human destroyer hip-checked a ceremonial frigate out of its lane and scissored it with 2 quick shots. Somewhere, an auric officer pressed a jeweled palm to lacquered wood and realized wood doesn't stop metal. Boarding flight is ready, Ops said. If we want their true relay seeds, we need a living hull. Mark the one still broadcasting slogans, Ortiz said. People who love microphones tend to lock fewer doors. She let herself think one quiet thought, a line she'd give a midshipman later, we do not win because we are cruel. We win because we stay curious under fire. The target auric cruiser, Chrysanthemum of Aurum, kept its honor band wide open, reciting articles of stewardship even as its escort bled glitter. That gave Gallo's team the window they needed. 4 coffin darts rode the exhaust wake of white kites, little more than ablative cones wrapped around atmosphere and intent. At the last yard, shaped charges kissed a seam and made a door where none had been. Flash hush, Lieutenant Morris said. Not a bang, just a gulp of light and a pressure whisper. Auric sentries folded as the hush stole the balance of their inner ears for 60 seconds. Non-lethal if you were lucky, miserable if you weren't. The point was mercy that didn't cost speed. Inside, the world turned to honeycomb and gold leaf. Hallways curved like calligraphy. Control pits were recessed like theaters. They built this to be admired, Mora muttered, setting a clamp charge on a trunk line. I can admire after we're done. Resolute shadowed the boarding track like a brawler keeping a friend's back. Missiles with bored eyes grazed the cruiser's skin and then found other work. Point defense stitched the air with quiet arrogance. Ortiz kept the ship close enough to feel the other hull's temperature through the needles. Close mattered. Boarding mattered. Railguns break ships, passwords end wars. Captain, Ops said, Chrysanthemum's captain is requesting parley on ceremonial band 7. Tell him I'm knitting, Ortiz said, eyes on the boarding telemetry. Then patch me to Min. Go, the ambassador answered. If Gallows pulls the seeds, we can mirror their relay architecture inside an hour. Silicate Choir says their tunette likes to sing its own praises. That's a diplomatic way to say insecure, Min said. Proceed. Mora's team loped through a garden of engineered gravity, boots whispering on inlaid paths past a shrine of polished stone. Names of former captains engraved in alien verse sat a core vault shaped like a blossom. Mora blinked at the metaphor, then cut it at the hinge. Hello, seeds. The seeds were not pearls or crystals. They were keys smeared in mathematics and trapped in cage logic, interlocked so that arrogance would trust them forever. Humans had learned to befriend cage logic the hard way. Mora slotted a leash through the locks and watched the handshake roll like a prayer wheel. Package, she said. 2 minutes. Also, we've got a live flag officer, unconscious, breathing. Orders. Ortiz tasted the options. Prisoners complicate clean lines. They also close future doors if you don't take them. Bag him. Treat him. We're not here to make martyrs. We're here to make teachers. On the outer boards, the box kept teaching. White kites hummed. Missiles argued. Resolute's belly gun wrote a signature across a guardship that had spent too much on trim. Energy still fell like rain and still fed the cisterns. The ship felt young. Captain, Tactical said, void line shimmer on the far edge. Someone's trying to skip out. Little sister, that's yours, Ortiz ordered. The old frigate answered with a cough of tachyon grit, an ugly packet that made the skip plane wrinkle. The would-be escapee stumbled back into normal space exactly where the frigate's rack wanted it. It learned about timing the final way. Mora's leash sang green. Seeds in hand, ma'am. We also scraped a ceremony cache hollow liturgies, honor rolls, and, a list of interdicted refugee convoys. Silence on the line for half a beat, the kind of silence that contains both anger and plans. Ortiz let out a measured breath. Understood. Exfil on trace 2. We're going to put their liturgy to work. As Gallo's team rode their darts home, Chrysanthemum tried something desperate, venting compartments to swing the weight distribution, a slapdash pirouette. Resolute accepted the clumsy spin, matching its roll with lazy grace, and patted the cruiser's thruster ring with a kinetic tap that said, "No." A shadow crossed Ortiz's thoughts, a photograph from Warsaw, a homemade radio in a window, a voice cutting through fear to say we are still here. Humans had always hijacked stages. It was time to steal a cathedral. "Min," she said, "mirrors ready when you are." "Compose the lesson," the ambassador replied. "I'll choose the hymn." The Auric ceremonial channel was a river of gold. Every syllable arrived with fretwork and flourish, every image framed to flatter the sender. When the mirror hit, the river turned into a lens. First came the names, not human names, but Auric, the ones etched on Chrysanthemum's shrine. Ortiz let those names stand intact. Then came frames from the cruiser's own theater, lists of acceptable losses, convoys tagged non-priority, a neat column that read relocation, deferred under a hollow of children in gray. Ambassador Min Tran's voice entered without title or trumpet. "To the worlds under Auric stewardship, here is how your guardians spend their honor." No rant. No gloat. Just the ledger. The mirror folded the list into the open bands at system scale, silicate choir harmonics wrapped it around the hegemony's own signal convention so the proudest ears would hear first. "Captain," Ops said, "we are getting 36 separate transmissions from Auric ships declaring that this is fabricated, seditious, treasonous." "Good," Ortiz said. "It means they watched." The return fire came less elegantly. A section of the Auric line, stung where reputation lived, threw its guns at Foundry 9. Bright threads cut the dust. 2 struck true. The old foundry rang like a bell and belched light from a seam no engineer wanted to see. "Damage," engineering snapped, voice tight. "Shell breach across Bays C and D, fire in cable wells." "We can hold, but..." "Refugee convoy dropping out of skip at corridor shell," tactical interrupted. Icons bloomed, Kithari life arcs, patched haulers, a hospital barge with a crooked spine. Behind them, Auric interdictors small, fast things built to bully freighters burned hard to intercept. The box would eat them if they chased. If they didn't chase, they'd shoot the stragglers from range. "Leah," Min said quietly. "If we light Foundry 9's full profile, she'll steal every shot for the convoy. She may not live through it. There are the choices you game on a whiteboard, and then there are the ones that arrive sweating and immediate." Ortiz didn't consult her conscience, she had already held the argument and written the answer in her bones. "Foundry 9, this is resolute actual," she said on the private loop. "Open the curtains. Full flare. Make yourself the tallest church in town." "Copy," came the Foundry master's voice, steady and old. "Been a while since we rang all the bells." Panels unfurled. Heatsinks spit steam. Metamaterial skins changed phase to bright white reflectance. On every Auric scope, Foundry 9 became the most obvious sin in the room. Interdictors turned like a school. Their fire converged and God bless stubborn rocks, most of it stuck. The convoy slid past behind the glare, tugs nudging, Kithari helms whispering gratitude that didn't need words. "Fire teams to wells," engineering said. "We're losing cable runs." "Marathon, Cold Harbor," Ortiz ordered, put your backs under the convoy. Little sister, so confusion no kills you don't need. We're saving, not scoring. The box flexed to a new rhythm. Missiles became shepherds. Guns rode fences. Interdictors met turbulence they couldn't name, found their targeting loops salted with decoys that looked like babies and scolded themselves for the hesitation. Two tried to be brave and paid for it in scrap, the rest chose survival over swagger. Inside Foundry 9, smoke made saints out of ordinary men and women. They hauled lines, cycled breakers by hand, sang nonsense to keep the pace. A section chief reported her own bay lost and asked permission to reroute through a corridor that would barbecue her shoes. Ortiz granted it, then swallowed the taste in her mouth. Convoy clear of corridor, Tactical said after the longest 5 minutes of the day. Hospital barge counting stars and crying. HFY arcs inbound to safe lanes. Foundry 9. Ortiz asked. Burns contained, came the answer, ragged with coughs. We'll limp and like it? On the open band, Admiral Kale Syth's voice was a stripped wire, no more ceremony, just heat. Human captain, you would defame our honor and then hide behind rocks. Present yourself and answer for this insolence. Ortiz let him speak, then answered with the same spare diction she'd used at the start. Admiral, we didn't defame anything. We held up your mirror. As for rocks, yes. We hide behind them. We live behind them. We build inside them and, when needed, we set them on fire to save people you wrote off. She cut the channel before he could put another coat of paint on the moment. On the staff loop, she allowed one exhale to tremble. Min, broadcast a simple doctrine, we'll show anyone how to survive this. But there are rules. Protect civilians. Standardize logistics to kinetic safe pass. Share what you can, take only what you must. Min's answer was soft and fierce. That's a banner I can carry. Outside, the wreckage of pretty things glittered. Inside, the banks were still full, the engines still coiled. In the deep, the harvesters kept coming, blind to honor and ornaments. Ortiz set her jaw and keyed the pursued plots. The lesson wasn't over. It had only found its audience. The true relay seeds came apart like a stubborn knot under deft fingers. In resolute signal bay, silicate choir analysts hummed pure tones, calling patterns into view that human eyes alone couldn't hold. Ambassador Min Tran stood with a mug gone cold, listening as meaning assembled itself from static and vanity. Auric backbone roots, the choir intoned through a voice box that made their chords almost flesh. Ceremonial channels shadow operational. We can whisper through their pride. Then whisper doctrine, Min said. Short, clear, and kinder than they deserve. Out in the belt, HFY packets sleek corvettes with cargo souls nested along human hulls, their crews chittering approval at rugged gunnery and preposterous redundancy. They had always been good at getting things from A to B fast. Now the B was battle-ready logistics, and the A was shaking off centuries of pretty lies. Ortiz took the first parley on a plain frequency. Admiral Syth appeared, less gold than before, more bone. The mirror had bitten deep. You vandalized a sacred channel, he said, voice ragged. You risk civilians to score. To save, Ortiz said. Words matter. So do rules. You want our help with the harvesters? Then we start with 3. She held up 3 fingers to a camera that didn't need the gesture. 1. Protect civilians first. Not as a slogan. As a budget line and a tactical constraint. 2. Standardize logistics. Our primitive kinetic rounds, guidance keys, and fuel chains become your standard for joint ops. If your guns can't throw metal, you'll learn. 3. Share receipts. Every battle gets audited across species. No ceremony. Just facts. SYTH's jaw worked. Honor cultures can bend if you give them a frame that still looks like a mirror. And in return, Min's voice cut in, velvet over steel, we'll teach you how to live long enough to argue with us. The Kitheri were first to sign. Their spokesman, 4 delicate hands flashing in an engineer's pigeon, said what mattered, we can build to spec by morning. The Silicate Choir added their odd hymn, we will keep the signals honest. Not everyone bowed. A cluster of Auric captains, jewels still bright, called the terms a defilement. Ortiz didn't argue. She sent them a box of parts and a manual written with cartoons. People who won't read a mirror sometimes read a comic. Training began in alleys between firefights. Human petty officers rode Kitheri hulls like teachers in rattling buses, tightening bolts and spirits with the same calm fingers. This is a white kite sleeve, a chief said, holding up the split-tip sabot like a dentist showing a tooth. You let the nose separate in flight, and it behaves. Listen to the word politely impolite to shields. You time it late so their computers can't get smug. Laughter in 3 languages broke the tension. In messes that smelled faintly of hot metal, Ortiz taught rules of fire around refugee arcs. This isn't charity, she told a circle of Auric lieutenants who still wore lace on their cuffs. It's strategy. Save a convoy today, and you have workers, pilots, welders tomorrow. Midway wasn't won by pretty ships. It was won because someone lied well on paper and someone else kept the fuel flowing. Learn the lesson. Harvesters were not waiting. They peeled a frontier moon like fruit, ate the farms, and left the soil blinking. Recon packets brought back cold numbers. Men put the data on the wall, plain as rain. Find, fix, finish, Ortiz said to the room. But we don't sprint blind. We cut the enemy's food first. SYTH frowned. The harvesters don't eat. They do, Ortiz said. They eat throughput. Routes lit up on the Chew map, slip gates, depots, honor stations hiding as shrines. Auric logistics had been designed to look good in statuary. The harvesters had been using the same parade routes humans now traced in cold light. Silicate Choir fingers rippled, Kitheri claws ticked. A plan took shape, flip the shrines into switches and make the parade end where you wanted it. Before they went, Ortiz keyed the ship wide. We're about to convoy a dozen species into a knife fight. Remember what we promised. Protect civilians. Standardize parts. Share receipts. If you see someone showboating, throw them a wrench or a role model. On a private loop, men added the part that didn't fit on posters. And when this breeds resentment, We answer it with dignity, not sneers. Changing doctrine is like mending a net while fishing. It looks ridiculous until it saves your life. On Auric screens, the Relic fleet looked less like trash and more like ballast weight that steadies the boat. On Kithari decks, chalk marks appeared around new bolts with jokes in 4 alphabets. On silicate song sheets, a new chord settled in: coalition, unpretty, and strong. The alliance was not born with a fanfare. It was born with a checklist. They called it Corpus Sun because it shone even when idle, a toroidal station steeped in gold, nested in a slipstream like a pearl in a river. Auric engineers had dreamed it in equations and artisan pride, next-gen shields that drank kinetics like wine, then belched righteous energy. The harvesters had not reached it yet. Humans would. Objective is capture, not crater, Ortiz told the Strike Council. We learn or we repeat history at louder volumes. Mora's Gallows team nodded like mechanics eyeing a stubborn pump. Kithari freighters played bait, their profiles disguised as fat merchant arcs, dragging a pennant of false telemetry. Silicate choir laced the tunette with stage directions. At H hour, 3 human cruisers and 5 relic destroyers rose from rubble like wolves from scrub and ran the approach lane at a burn that made Auric officers whisper impolite words. Corpus Sun woke fast. Petals unfolded. Honor bands opened with injunctions and injunctions about injunctions. A reliquary cannon stirred at the hub, a weapon built for pageants that could still shear a careless hull. They built an opera house, Mora said into her throat mic. We brought a math textbook. White kites came in first, not to kill but to speak. Split tips flicked at calibration plates, measuring phase jitter. Missiles played fetch with point defense, teaching it to chase the wrong ball. Resolve under fire is a phrase, under fire, it's a muscle. Ortiz kept the rhythm steady. Marathon, you carry the hymn. Cold Harbor, guard the choir. Little sister, when the shimmer stutters, bite. It stuttered. New shields, for all their promise, still had to pick a language, speak energy or speak mass. When they tried to be poets, physics made them prose. At the microsecond of confusion, little sister spat a packet of ugly numbers. The station's skip field hiccuped, and for one beautiful breath, doors that had been painted became doors that were open. Go, Ortiz said. Coffin darts kissed seams again. Mora's people slid through gliding gold and landed in a sanctum decorated with axioms and flowers. The shield heart was a cage of angles around a vat of liquid light. Mora touched a probe to the rim and sang the code humans had learned by bleeding: be useful or be quiet. The vat quieted. Not off, not dead. Merely curious. They were right, Mora breathed. It can drink rods and burp storms if you let it choose the song. Can we make it hum our tune? Ortiz asked. Given a minute and 3 prayers. Outside, an Auric relief wing appeared on the Chew map, burning hard for the station, honor plumes at full bloom. SYTH's squawk came on a private beam. If you scar that heart, generations will curse you. If we don't learn it, Ortiz answered, there won't be generations left to curse. She thought of Canny and how some victories teach nothing but arrogance. She would not salt this Carthage. She would sign it to a class. Mora's team wrestled the heart into a low growl and swapped its loyalties, not destroyed, not stolen, adopted. They tied its thresholds to a kill switch in silicate cant, they pinned its field orientation to a set of kinetic exceptions. When it saw a white kite, it would sigh and think of a friendly hand. When it saw a harvester spike, it would bare its teeth. Package tamed, Mora reported. We're leaving it kinder than we found it. Copy. Plant the receipt, Ortiz said. On the way out, they left a plaque in code on the bulkhead. This station saved lives on this date by refusing a parade and accepting a job. It wasn't art. It was instruction. The relief wing arrived to find human ships not looting but labeling. SYTH came on screen looking like a man who had been to a funeral and learned a trade. You could have taken it, he said. We did, Ortiz replied, the only way that matters. Your builders will hate my patch notes and then adopt them. That's how civilizations climb. He inclined his head a fraction. Honor cultures can bow without breaking if you give them a reason that tastes like pride. The campaign turned mean in the weeks after. Slipgates darkened behind the Alliance like streetlights clicked off before a storm. Depots were emptied and restocked with ugly parts that worked wet or frozen. The harvester arc bent toward a lane that now had switches and fences. They would come. The Alliance would meet them not at a parade ground, but at a yard with chalk on the floor and names on the wall. The distress came as a heartbeat and a ghost. Hestia 3, a brown-green world with tight oceans and stubborn farmers, stuttered on the net. The harvester's signature followed, a comb of hard spikes, regular as teeth. At the exact same hour, Men's intercept desk caught a private Auric burst. Admiral SYTH had been ordered to a conclave at Orichalcum Gate, brain and spine of what remained of hegemony pride. Catch him there, and the war might fold. Miss him, and the harvesters would score a clean extinction. Ortiz felt the room hold its breath. Strategy loves clean choices. Reality brings two burning buildings and one hose. We can split, a staffer said, too quickly. We can't, Ortiz answered. We can pretend. And we can write letters to mothers afterward. Men's face on the side screen was composed in the way a diplomat's must be when promising pain. If we take SYTH, the hegemony's apparatus collapses into councils we can bargain with. If we save Hestia, 30,000 kids draw pictures tomorrow. Leah. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Moral mathematics is not arithmetic, it's triage. Ortiz looked at the brass stopwatch and thought of a photograph. Children filling bottles on a line under fighter cover while grown-ups rode. Dunkirk logistics, they'd called it, making escape wholly by sheer intention. We save Hestia, she said. We make it loud enough that Orichalcum hears what power is for. Not everyone nodded. A junior Auric officer in the joint pit hissed and then swallowed it. Admiral SYTH will live, Ortiz said. And learn. Maybe both. The pursuit plan for Orichalcum curled itself into a drawer. The rescue plan for Hestia snapped open like a map that already knew the roads. Kithari arcs shed cargo and grew cradles. Corpusant's tamed heart laid a screen across the approach that would push, not break. Silicate choir seeded the net with the simple truth of a coming evacuation. Come to this point, at this hour, with this code, bring your names. Orbit looked like a junkyard ballet. White kites rode fences. Missiles shepherded, go here, not there, live. Harvester machines came on in humdrum hunger, refusing parley, ignoring decoy and plea. They were elegant the way a guillotine is elegant. Humans met them with an uglier grace. Valley Forge, you anchor the shield line, Ortiz ordered. The old cruiser planted its boots and took the worst of it, armor tiles hissing, heat sinks screaming, reactor singing as it drank for others. Gettysburg, dance. Make them chase you, make them forget math. On the ground, tractors pulled ships like sleds to launch strips drawn in chalk, and school teachers read lists into microphones in 2 languages with a third braided through names, always names. An Auric squadron under a captain who still wore lace arrived late, then saw the hospital barge that Resolute had saved days ago and shut up. They joined the screen without speech. SYTH did not appear. Orichalcum gate lit with honor traffic and no admiral to show it how to bow. Hestia's sky burned. Harvesters pushed. Corpuson's gift bent the assault into heat and thunder, and here the lesson from just war theory came alive: proportionality isn't weakness, it's aim. Humans fired only what would move machines out of killing lanes. When a shot would save 2 at the cost of 1, they took it with a promise to build the ledger back. In the 5th hour, Valley Forge coughed a plume that meant done. We can hold 5 minutes, her captain rasped. Maybe 6 if you tell me a joke. Ortiz told her about a miner who shaved with a railgun slug because mirrors were for ceremonies. The chuckle came back wet and brave. In the 7th hour, kids who would have been ash-strapped into Kitheri cradles, and a farmer with soil under every nail saluted a human petty officer like they were both the end of a law. By the 9th, the evacuation was a map of gratitude. By the 10th, the harvester wave decided it had chewed enough iron for 1 day and turned away along a lane the Alliance had salted with rumors and currents. The relief in the room was not triumphant. It was something like quiet. Orichalcum, deprived of its admiral, shouted into its own chapel. SYTH slipped away through a back stair in the net, pride dented, calculus altered. He had watched the feed the mirror, the rescue, the choice. He would remember who saved his people when he couldn't. After Hestia, the Auric gossip machine did what gossip machines do when truth outruns varnish: it broke. Worlds that had mocked relics began sending grain and welders. Captains who had sniffed at bolts asked for torque specs. The hegemony Senate tried to censure SYTH and found that honor had quietly changed addresses. Men put the thing that had become inevitable into words. We cannot be the only standard by muscle. We have to be the standard by consent. In a decommissioned or bay-turned hall, representatives stood under a string of ship lights and signed the first sheets of a compact that history might actually keep. It didn't have a trumpet. It had a checklist. They called it, with typical human unfanciness, the Liberation Alliance Mandate. The spine was 3 lines everyone knew by heart now: protect civilians. Standardize logistics. Share receipts. Beneath that came the tech clauses, the ones that made engineers squint and lawyers earn their food: metamaterial absorption licensed with safeties and circuit breakers, Corpus Sun-class shields bound to kinetic exceptions, slipgate governance subject to cross-species audit. A silicate choir cantor added a paragraph about honesty in networks that sounded like scripture and was, in fact, a list of test ports. The Kithari appended a drawing of a white kite sleeve done by a child who had written in one as cargo 2 noses, smiling. Some Auric houses balked. Ortiz didn't push. She told them where to find the parts and who to call when their pride broke in half. A few days later those calls came, always at odd hours, couched as hypotheticals. Pride is a shy animal. It drinks at dusk. SYTH arrived in person, without the mask. He stood in the orbe, looked up at the unpretentious lights, and spoke like a man tired of opera. "You could have taken my head and I would have called it justice," he said to Ortiz. "You saved farmers instead. I would follow soldiers like that." "Don't," Ortiz said. "Follow the rules. They'll outlive us." Harvesters did not sign. They came, regular as morning. The pursuit doctrine matured, find with choir ears, fix with Kithari bait and human fences, finish with whatever killed fastest and broke least. The Alliance learned to hunt, not just to brace. Skip lanes became traps set with math and patience. Stations like Corpus Sun turned from cathedrals into clinics that treated physics and sent ships back better. In a quiet hour, Ortiz and men walked Foundry 9's scarred catwalks, the welds still proud where the fire had licked. "We're going to make mistakes," men said. "We already have," Ortiz replied. "We'll write them down where others can see." She stopped at the plaque Mora's team had left aboard Corpus Sun and thought about carving something similar here, not for glory but for instruction. She decided the welds were plaque enough. Messages arrived from worlds humanity had never learned to pronounce. Some were thanks, some were bribes dressed as thanks, most were questions. How much metal does a white kite want? How do you teach a child to enter a cradle without fear? Why are you so kind and so lethal? The last made Ortiz smile, a small, tired thing. Because kindness without teeth is a wish, she told a camera. And teeth without kindness is a habit. We are trying to be a promise. The mandate traveled like a recipe, copied, stained, improved. On a mining moon, a choir of teenagers recited the 3 lines before drills started. On a Kithari arc, a quartermaster wrote torque specs on the wall and circled them with hearts. On an Auric deck where lace had been stripped for rags, a captain taught a midshipman how to read a receipt and call it holy. In the far dark, a harvester's spine split wrong under a fence built from 5 languages, and the debris field glittered like confetti at a parade no one missed. Resolute swung through it with engines that still drank light and guns that still threw iron, her hull a notebook of impacts and lessons. Leah Ortiz watched icons drift where enemies had been and felt the ship settle into its purpose. "Set course," she said. "Outer rim lanes first. We hunt, we teach, we mend." Men's answer rode the intercom with a smile you could hear. "And we audit." The fleet turned not pretty, not ornamental, but righteous, which is a harder thing. Behind them, in orbes and schoolhouses, people repeated 3 lines and added a 4th under their breath, "Remember why." Ahead, the dark didn't care about slogans. It cared about work. The Black Armada, so named by someone who had seen the belt at night and loved it, went to work.